They thought it was just another cozy family dinner in Westbridge until my daughter-in-law stood up, pointed a manicured finger at my face, and called me a traitor. The room went dead silent. She believed she had finally cornered me, but she had no idea I had been waiting for this exact moment for months. When I plugged that USB drive into the TV, I was not just defending myself. I was detonating a bomb that would tear this house apart. My name is Martha Ellison, and I am almost 70 years old, yet sitting at this long mahogany table in Westbridge, Colorado, I felt smaller than the snowflakes melting against the dark window pane. The dining room was bathed in the golden glow of the chandelier, a picture-perfect scene for a pre-Christmas gathering. Outside, the wind howled through the pine trees, but inside, the air was thick with a heat that had nothing to do with the central heating. My hand trembled as I lifted the crystal pitcher to pour myself a glass of water. The ice cubes clinked against the glass, a sharp sound that seemed too loud in the sudden lull of conversation. I tried to smile at my grandson, but my gaze drifted to my son. Daniel. Daniel is in his early 40s now, and even at a family dinner, he wore his white office shirt, the top button undone to reveal a neck taut with stress. He looked exhausted, his eyes shadowed, sitting right next to his wife, Amanda Brooks. Amanda looked radiant and terrifying all at once. She was dressed in a sharp crimson dress that matched her lipstick, every hair in place, radiating the confidence of a high-level executive at Ardenvale Systems. I sipped my water, trying to shrink into my chair, feeling like a grey, unwanted shadow in the house my son paid for, but his wife ruled. The clinking of silverware on china stopped when Amanda cleared her throat. She did not look at me, but her words were aimed like darts. "It is amazing," Amanda said, swirling the red wine in her glass, "how some people just become a liability as they age. They lose their filter. They forget that loose lips. Actually sink ships." The silence that followed was suffocating. My sister, Aunt Ruth, looked down at her plate, and my cousin Kyle shifted his weight in his chair, the wood creaking loudly. I felt my heart hammer against my ribs. Suddenly, Amanda stood up. The chair legs scraped harshly against the floorboards. She held her wineglass up, her eyes sweeping over the table with a cold, predatory gleam. "I need everyone to be quiet for 1 minute," she announced, her voice trembling with a staged sort of grief. "I have a truth, a very heartbreaking truth that I need to share tonight." Daniel looked up at her, confused. "Honey, your mother," Amanda said, pointing a finger directly at my face, "has betrayed us. She has been going around the neighborhood, telling people my private business. She leaked confidential internal affairs from Ardenvale to the neighbors. Because of her big mouth, the rumors got back to the board. And I lost the promotion to Human Resources Director today. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. I set my glass down, my fingers numb. What Daniel whispered. Then, his face turned a violent shade of red. He stood up so fast his chair tipped over backward with a crash. He slammed his fist onto the table, making the plates jump and the wine glasses shudder. "Is this true?" he roared. The vein in his forehead pulsed visibly. He looked at me not like I was the woman who had scrubbed floors to pay for his college tuition, but like a defendant standing trial in a ruthless family court. "Daniel, please," I said, my voice barely a whisper, my hands shaking so bad I had to clasp them together in my lap. I swear I do not know what she is talking about. I did not know about any promotion or any internal interview. I never said a word to anyone. Liar Amanda cut in, her voice shrill and piercing. She slammed her hand on the table. You are just jealous. You have always wanted to sabotage me because you cannot stand that I am successful. You want to ruin my marriage and break this family apart because you are miserable. Daniel spun around, his eyes wild. He reached out to the kitchen island behind him and grabbed the heavy, long-handled wooden potato masher we had used earlier. It was a threatening, irrational gesture, fueled by blind fury. He took 2 heavy steps toward me, gripping the wooden handle so tight his knuckles turned white. Confess. Mom, he said, his voice shaking with a terrifying mix of rage and hurt. Just admit what you did. Right now. Tell everyone how you ruined her career. I froze. I looked around the table, searching for a lifeline. Aunt Ruth bit her lip and looked down at her napkin. Kyle pretended to inspect his fork. Even my granddaughter looked terrified, eyes darting between her parents. No one moved. No one spoke. No one stood up to say that this was madness. I was completely alone. The dinner had transformed into a public execution, and I was the condemned. But as I looked at Daniel's distorted face and Amanda's triumphant smirk, a strange calm settled over me. I realized that this nightmare was not a surprise. This was the exact moment I had felt coming for months. The wooden handle in Daniel's grip blurred before my eyes, and for a heartbeat, I did not see the angry 40-year-old man standing over me. Instead, I saw the ghost of the boy I had raised on my own. I remembered the scent of bleach and industrial detergent that used to cling to my skin, a smell I could never quite scrub away no matter how hard I tried. For 20 years after my husband passed, I worked 2 jobs. I spent my days folding other people's sheets at the laundromat and my nights emptying trash cans in downtown office buildings until 3 a.m. I did it all, so Daniel would never have to feel the gnawing hunger of poverty that I knew so well. I remembered the day he graduated. The sun was blazing hot that afternoon, but I shivered with pure pride as I watched him walk across the stage, the first Ellison to ever hold a college degree. He found me in the crowd afterward, threw his arms around my neck, and whispered, "I did it. Mum, we did it." I cried all the way home, believing that every cracked fingernail and every hour of lost sleep had been worth it. Then came Amanda. I remember the first time Daniel brought her home for dinner. She was sweet, almost aggressively so. She brought me a soft grey wool scarf as a gift, claiming she saw it in a window and just thought of me. "It brings out the blue in your eyes, Mom," she had said, her voice dripping with honey. She called me Mom after knowing Daniel for only 3 weeks. At the time, I thought it was charming. I thought she was eager for family connection. During their first few years of marriage, she was the perfect wife. She helped clean up after Thanksgiving dinners. She laughed at Aunt Ruth's repetitive stories, and she held Daniel's arm like he was the center of her universe. Everyone told me Daniel had struck gold, but the facade began to crack the moment I sold my old bungalow. I gave them the proceeds for the down payment on a large, modern house with a separate living suite on the ground floor. The plan was simple. I would live downstairs, close but independent. However, the moment the moving trucks left, Amanda changed. It started with small things. She would sigh loudly when I walked into the kitchen to make tea. She would reorganize the pantry and accidentally hide my favorite mugs on the highest shelf where I could not reach them. Whenever I tried to bring up these small slights, she twisted reality until I felt dizzy. If I mentioned she was rude, she would run to Daniel in tears. "I am trying so hard. Daniel." She would sob to him. "But your mother? She just wants to control everything. She criticizes how I cook, how I clean. I feel like a stranger in my own home." So Daniel would come downstairs, looking torn and exhausted, and ask me to be more lenient. I packed my bags 3 times in the first year, ready to move into the senior housing complex on the other side of town. But each time, Daniel stopped me. "Mum, please." He would beg, holding my hands. "We need you. We need someone to watch the house when we travel. I need to know you are safe." I stayed because I loved him, but I became a prisoner in the basement. I spent my evenings sitting in my armchair, listening to the muffled sounds of their laughter and footsteps on the floorboards above my head. I was the foundation of their house, yet I was completely excluded from their home. The only person who seemed to notice was my neighbor, Irene. One afternoon, while we were weeding the garden beds along the fence, she leaned in close. "Is everything okay with that daughter-in-law of yours?" Irene asked quietly. "She walks past me sometimes. She looks like a violin string about to snap. There is something hard in her eyes." "Martha." Irene's words planted a seed of doubt in my chest, but I was too afraid to water it. I watched as Amanda slowly took over every aspect of Daniel's life. She managed their finances, she filled his social calendar with her friends, and she dictated when he could see me. "Daniel is swamped with work this week," she would text me, even though I could hear him watching television upstairs. She created an invisible wall between my son and me, brick by brick, until I was nothing more than a ghost haunting the lower level of their lives. And now, sitting at this dinner table, looking at the hate in my son's eyes, I realized she had finally decided to exorcise me completely. It all began on a grey Tuesday afternoon in late October. I had taken the bus downtown to pick up a prescription for my blood pressure, and as I walked past the gleaming glass tower of Ardenvale Systems, I saw her. Amanda was standing on the curb, but she was not waiting for a taxi or an Uber. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb, and the window rolled down. The driver was a man I recognized instantly from the company newsletters Daniel was always so proud to show me. It was Victor Hale, the Vice President of Human Resources. He was a silver-haired man in his late 50s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my entire year of Social Security checks. My instinct screamed that something was wrong. Amanda did not look like an employee going to a meeting. She looked like a woman with a secret. Despite the biting wind and the dull, throbbing ache of arthritis in my knees, I made a split-second decision. I did not go home. Instead, I boarded the number 4 bus, which happened to be pulling up right behind their vehicle. The traffic was heavy that afternoon, so the bus kept pace with the black SUV as it wound its way out of the city centre and toward the wealthy suburbs. The SUV finally turned into the driveway of the Gilded Oak, a luxury hotel known for its discretion and exorbitant prices. I got off at the next stop and limped back, my joints protesting every step. I took a seat in a small coffee shop directly across the street, buying a cup of herbal tea just to justify my presence. I sat there for nearly 2 hours, staring through the cafe window until my eyes burned. When they finally emerged from the elevators in the hotel lobby, visible through the grand glass doors, the dynamic had shifted completely. Victor had his hand resting intimately on the small of Amanda's back. They were not discussing spreadsheets or quarterly projections. They were laughing, their heads bent close together in a private world. My hands shook violently as I dug my old smartphone out of my purse. The screen was cracked from a drop 3 years ago, and the camera lens was scratched. But I managed to open the video app. I held it up, trying to steady my arm against the cafe table. The video was grainy, but the truth was undeniable. I recorded as they walked toward the valet stand. Victor leaned in and whispered something into Amanda's ear, and she threw her head back and laughed, leaning her weight against his shoulder for several seconds. Then, right before the valet brought the car around, their fingers interlaced briefly. It was a touch so familiar, so practiced, that it made my stomach turn. On the bus ride home, I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the motion of the vehicle. I was terrified. I knew exactly how this would look. I was the meddling mother-in-law, the old woman who saw things that were not there. If I told Daniel without absolute proof, he would hate me. That night, I tried to test the waters. Daniel was in the kitchen, heating up leftovers. "Daniel," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, Do you think you can trust everyone at your office? Sometimes people, well, they are not who they seem to be." Daniel spun around, his face hardening instantly. "Oh my God. Mum, stop it. Are you listening to Mrs. Irene's gossip again? Amanda is the only person at that company who actually supports me. She is fighting for my promotion every single day. Do not start with your paranoid theories." I shut my mouth, my heart sinking. He was blind to it. After that day, Amanda changed. It was as if she sensed my suspicion. She started locking her laptop the second she stepped away from it. She changed the Wi-Fi password and claimed it was a router reset. Whenever I walked into a room while she was on the phone, she would stop talking immediately and glare at me until I left. She was erasing her tracks. But she did not know I had kept one thing. I did not delete the video. I was too afraid to keep it on my phone where she might guess the passcode. So I bought a small, cheap USB drive from the pharmacy. I transferred the file, wrapped the drive in a piece of tissue, and taped it to the underside of the heavy oak cabinet in the living room. It was a desperate act, a silent scream for insurance. I told myself I would never use it unless I had no other choice. I never imagined that the choice would be forced upon me in such a public, humiliating way. One afternoon, I decided to surprise Daniel with a homemade lunch at his office. As I approached the break room, I heard Amanda's voice drifting through the open door. She was not whispering. She was speaking in that sympathetic, martyr-like tone she had perfected to charm everyone around her. "It is getting really hard," she was saying to a group of young associates. "My mother-in-law, she is starting to mix things up. She tells the neighbors wild stories about the company. I am terrified she is going to leak something sensitive just because she is confused." I froze, clutching the paper bag to my chest until the grease stained my blouse. She was planting seeds of doubt before I could even open my mouth. She was discrediting me preemptively. Later that week, the brochures appeared on the kitchen counter. They were glossy pamphlets for a place called Maple Crest Residence. It looked like a luxury resort in the pictures, but I knew exactly what it was. It was a warehouse for the unwanted. It is for her own safety. Daniel. I heard Amanda arguing in their bedroom one night. And honestly, for yours too. How can you focus on the quarterly review when you are constantly worried about what she is doing downstairs? She is becoming a liability. Daniel defended me at first, but water wears down stone. Amanda began to stage little accidents to prove her point. One day, she left a folder stamped confidential right in the center of the kitchen table. When I moved it to wipe the surface, she accused me of reading it. I saw Mrs. Irene looking at you through the window, Amanda claimed later, her eyes wide with fake concern. Did you show her this, Daniel? She is showing internal documents to the neighborhood. I only moved it to clean, I stammered, but the seed was already growing in Daniel's mind. The humiliation peaked during a small family get-together a few weeks before Christmas. We were all sitting in the living room when Amanda turned to me with a bright, condescending smile. "Mom, tell everyone about that delicious pasta we had yesterday," she said. I frowned, confused. "We had chicken yesterday. Amanda." She laughed, a light, tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, Mom. See, this is what I mean. We had pasta. You really do not remember, do you?" I looked around the room. Aunt Ruth gave me a pitying look. Kyle shook his head. They believed her. I was being painted as the senile old woman, the unreliable witness to my own life. If I spoke up about the affair now, they would just say it was another delusion of a decaying mind. But the true horror revealed itself on a Tuesday night. I was coming up the stairs to get a glass of water when I heard Amanda's voice from the home office. She was on a video call. I stopped in the shadows of the hallway, holding my breath. "You are stalling, Victor," Amanda snapped. "I did everything you asked. I kept quiet about the audit risks. I even handled the Daniel problem." There was a pause, and then Victor's voice crackled through the speaker. I crept closer, my heart thumping against my ribs. "The promotion list is finalized," Victor said, "but that video, if that footage from the hotel gets out, we are both finished." "It won't," Amanda hissed. "The old hag is losing credibility every day. But you owe me. I literally restructured the entire department to push Daniel out of the running for the promotion so you could bring in your nephew. I betrayed my own husband for this deal." "Victor." I pressed a hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. The air left my lungs. It was not just an affair. It was a coup. She was not just sleeping with his boss. She was actively destroying Daniel's career to advance her own. My son was being slaughtered, and the butcher was sleeping in his bed. I backed away slowly, my legs trembling. I knew then that words would never be enough. If I simply told Daniel, he would think I was jealous or confused. I needed weapons. I needed undeniable proof. From that night on, I stopped trying to argue. I became the quiet, confused old lady she wanted me to be. But every time she left her phone unlocked on the counter for even 10 seconds, I was there. I learned to take screenshots. I learned to forward emails to a secret account I made at the library. I recorded snippets of conversations through the thin walls. I was gathering ammunition, bullet by bullet, waiting for the right moment to pull the trigger. The room was spinning, or perhaps it was just the blood rushing in my ears. The flashback of my discovery faded, leaving me back in the harsh, yellow light of the dining room, facing the firing squad. Amanda was still standing, her hands gripping the back of her chair as if she were the one needing support, weaving her narrative with terrifying precision. "Victor called me into his office this morning," Amanda said, her voice cracking perfectly on cue. "He told me that the board has lost faith in my ability to maintain confidentiality. Apparently, a family member has been spreading rumors about the upcoming restructuring plan. He implied that if I cannot control my own household, I cannot control a department of 200 people. She wiped a tear from her cheek, though her eyes remained dry and sharp as flint. And then she continued, turning to look at Daniel. Mrs. Irene stopped me at the mailbox yesterday. She asked me if I was excited about the director position. Daniel, that information was classified. Only the board knew. How did a neighbor know the only person Irene talks to is your mother? Daniel's head snapped toward me. His eyes narrowed as he processed the information, his anger latching onto the convenient logic she offered. Wait, Daniel muttered, his voice low and dangerous. Irene brought that fruitcake over last Tuesday. She asked me how things were going at the big company. I thought she was just making small talk. But she knew. She knew, because you told her. He shouted the last part, and I flinched, physically. No, I cried out, my voice trembling. I never told Irene anything about a promotion. We talk about gardening. We talk about the weather. I do not even know what restructuring means. Oh, stop it, Amanda interrupted, her voice raising to drown me out. You have been obsessed with my job for months. You listen to my calls. You check my phone when I leave it in the kitchen. I have seen you. You ask questions about my schedule that no normal mother-in-law asks. You are jealous. Martha, you are jealous that I have a career, and you have nothing. I looked around the table, begging for someone to see through her lies, but Aunt Ruth was nodding slowly. She has been complaining a lot lately. Ruth whispered to Kyle, loud enough for everyone to hear. She told me she felt left out. Maybe she did it for attention. Kyle shrugged, looking at me with disdain. Old people get confused. Ruth, they talk too much. My own family was rewriting my history in real time. My complaints about loneliness were being twisted into evidence of malice. My confusion was being weaponized. Daniel took a step closer to me. The heavy wooden potato masher was still clutched in his right hand. He raised it slightly, not as if to strike, but as an extension of his fury. I want the truth, Daniel demanded, his voice shaking with the effort to control himself. Did you or did you not talk to Irene about Amanda's job? Do not lie to me. Mom, I am warning you. Do not lie to me right now. I told her Amanda works in human resources. I stammered, tears streaming down my face now. That is all I said, I swear, on your father's grave. Daniel, I only said she works hard. I didn't. I heard her. Daniel, Amanda screamed, cutting me off. I heard Irene say it. I have tried to protect you from this. I tried to shield you from how bad she has gotten. I wanted to be a good daughter-in-law. But I cannot let her destroy our future. I just cannot do it anymore. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing loudly. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Daniel looked at his weeping wife, then back at me with pure disgust. You are unbelievable. He spat at me. I sat there, frozen. My honor was being shredded. My memory was being questioned. The son I had sacrificed everything for was looking at me like I was a cancer that needed to be cut out. I saw the muscles in his arm tense as he gripped the masher, and for the first time in my life, I was actually afraid of my own child. But in that pit of despair, a spark ignited. I looked past Daniel's angry silhouette to the dark wooden cabinet next to the television. Tucked underneath the bottom shelf, taped securely to the wood, was a small black USB drive. I realized then that pleading was useless. Tears were useless. They had already decided I was the villain. If I was going on trial, I would not go down as the confused old woman. I would go down fighting. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I stopped shaking. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of roast beef and betrayal. It was time to show them exactly what a traitor looked like. I did not say a word. I did not apologize. And I certainly did not beg for mercy. Instead, I pushed my chair back with a deliberate slowness that seemed to confuse the room. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles on my skirt, and walked straight toward the living room area. I had to pass within inches of Daniel, who was still breathing heavily with the wooden masher clutched in his fist. But I did not look at him. I could hear the confused whispers of my relatives behind me. "Where is she going?" Aunt Ruth hissed. "She is finally cracking," Kyle muttered. "She is just wandering off." I knelt by the mahogany entertainment unit next to the large television. My fingers found the spot underneath the bottom shelf immediately. I peeled the tape away, the sound of the adhesive ripping distinct in the quiet room, and retrieved the small black USB drive. My hands were shaking, not from fear anymore, but from the adrenaline of execution. I stood up and inserted the drive into the side port of the smart TV. Amanda was still talking, her voice high and shrill as she continued to paint me as the villain. "She just walks away. She cannot even face." Her voice was cut off by a sudden burst of light. I held the remote control, a device they all assumed I was too old to understand, and navigated the source menu with practiced ease. I did not stumble. I did not ask for help. I selected the file and pressed play. The 65-inch screen flooded the room with the high-definition image of the Gilded Oak Hotel lobby. The timestamp in the corner read 4:30 in the afternoon, barely 2 months ago. At first, the family just stared, perhaps assuming I had accidentally turned on a holiday movie or a news channel. But then the camera zoomed in. It was shaky, handheld footage, but the subjects were unmistakable. Victor Hale stood near the concierge desk, his grey suit immaculate. Amanda walked up to him, not with the brisk pace of a subordinate, but with a swaying, relaxed gait. The camera followed them as they moved toward the elevators. The entire room watched as Victor raised his hand and placed it squarely on the small of Amanda's back, his fingers splaying out in a gesture of possessive familiarity. They stopped in front of a mirror while waiting for the lift. Victor leaned in, whispering something that made Amanda throw her head back in laughter. Then, in high definition, we saw his hand move up to stroke her hair, tucking a strand behind her ear. She did not pull away. She leaned into his touch, her face glowing with an adoration she had not shown Daniel in years. The silence in the living room was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of everyone's lungs. Thud-clack. The sound was sharp and jarring. Daniel's hand had gone limp. The heavy wooden potato masher hit the hardwood floor, bouncing once before settling near his feet. He did not seem to notice. His mouth was slightly open, his eyes wide and unblinking, fixed on the screen where his wife was entering an elevator with another man. I did not stop the video there. The scene cut to the exterior of the hotel, the sky dark with evening. The camera angle was from across the street now. Victor held the passenger door of the black SUV open. Before Amanda climbed in, she paused. She placed a hand on his chest, stood on her tiptoes, and pressed a lingering kiss to his cheek. It was not a greeting. It was a goodbye between lovers. Her lips stayed on his skin for 3 full seconds before she pulled back, smiling that secret, intimate smile. "No," Amanda shrieked. The sound was like tearing metal. She lunged from her chair, stumbling in her high heels. "That is old. That is out of context. Turn it off." She rushed toward the television, her hands clawing at the air, trying to reach the USB port to rip it out. I took a calm step back, clutching the remote against my chest. "Get out of the way," Amanda screamed, reaching for me. Suddenly, a figure blocked her path. It was my granddaughter, Olivia. She stood between her mother and the television, her young face pale but her eyes fierce. "Stop. Mom," Olivia said, her voice shaking. I want to see this. I want to see it clearly." "Olivia! Move!" Amanda yelled. But she stopped, unable to shove her own daughter aside. Aunt Ruth had both hands over her mouth, her eyes bulging as she looked from the screen to Daniel. Kyle had picked up the spare remote from the coffee table, his thumb hovering over the power button to end the awkwardness. But he froze. He looked at Daniel's face. My son had gone completely white, his skin the colour of ash. His eyes were red-rimmed and watery, and his entire body was rigid, as if he had been turned to stone. On the screen, the video ended. The final frame was a reflection in the hotel's glass door as the SUV drove away. It showed a faint, ghostly image of an old woman holding a phone with trembling hands. It was me. It was the undeniable proof that I had not manufactured this. I had lived it. The screen went black, leaving only the sound of Amanda's jagged breathing and the hum of the refrigerator. I turned slowly to face them. I looked at Ruth, then at Kyle, and finally, I let my gaze rest on Daniel. "If I were the traitor," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through the silence like a knife. I would have deleted that video a long time ago. The silence in the room did not last long. Amanda was cornered, and like a trapped animal, she lashed out with the only weapon she had left. She did not hang her head in shame. Instead, she threw her hands up, her face contorted into a mask of terrified victimhood. "He forced me," she screamed, tears streaming down her face again, though they looked far less convincing this time. "You do not understand Victor. Everyone knows he has a reputation. He is a predator. He touches all the female staff. That video." I was terrified. "Daniel, I was just trying to keep my job. I was smiling because I was scared of what he would do if I rejected him." She turned to Aunt Ruth, pleading with her eyes. "I was being harassed. And you? You are using my trauma to attack me." The room wavered. For a second, I saw doubt flicker in Kyle's eyes. It was a powerful accusation, one that could easily dismantle my entire case if I did not act immediately. "Is that so?" I asked calmly. My voice was steady, anchoring the chaos in the room. "Then tell me, Amanda, how exactly were you forced to send this?" I reached into the pocket of my cardigan and pulled out my old, cracked smartphone. But I did not just read from it. I pressed the next button on the remote control, advancing the slideshow on the television screen. A screenshot of a text conversation appeared, blown up to 65 inches of high-definition betrayal. It was dated 3 months ago. The contact name was saved as V.Ch. Priority. The message from Amanda read, "If you really push Daniel off the promotion list, I owe you another weekend. I will make it worth your while." A gasp rippled through the room. Aunt Ruth covered her mouth with both hands. Kyle let out a low whistle of disbelief. The words were there, stark and undeniable. This was not harassment. This was a transaction. I clicked the remote again. Another image appeared. This one was a response from Victor. "What about the old lady? Is she going to be a problem?" Amanda's reply was underneath it. "Do not worry. His mother won't be living here long. I am working on moving her to a home. She is just baggage, baggage." I repeated the words softly, looking at my sister and my cousin. That is all I was to her. A piece of luggage to be thrown out so she could have the house to herself. Daniel took a step closer to the screen. He was squinting, as if trying to make the words change, but they remained fixed. I clicked one last time. This message was the most recent, sent only 2 weeks ago. "He is such a naive boy," Amanda had written, referring to Daniel. "He thinks he is earning the spot. He has no idea I am the one pulling the strings." Daniel made a sound that was half sob, half growl. He stared at the words, "naive boy," as if they had been branded onto his skin. It was a slap in the face, more painful than any physical blow. "That is fake," Amanda shrieked, lunging toward the television again. But Olivia blocked her path with her arms crossed. She edited those. Look at her phone. It is ancient. She probably paid someone to Photoshop those. "It is a setup. I expected you to say that." I said. I pulled a second. Silver USB drive from my pocket and held it up. I walked over and plugged it into the second port on the TV. "This drive contains the original backup files," I announced to the room. "It has the metadata. It shows the date, the time, and the device ID for every single screenshot. These were not created today. They have been sitting on your phone for months." I navigated to the file properties on the screen. The creation dates were clear: August, September, October. Long before this dinner, long before she accused me of being a traitor. "I found them by accident," I said, turning to face the family. "One morning, about 4 months ago. You left your phone on the kitchen island while you went to shower. It buzzed. I saw the name V.Ch. Priority pop up. I knew that was your boss. I knew it was odd for a boss to be texting at 6 in the morning on a Saturday." I looked at Daniel, my heart aching for him. I unlocked it. I confessed. "I know the passcode is your birthday. Amanda, you are not as clever as you think." I scrolled through them, and I took pictures with my own phone. And yes, I felt terrible. I took a deep breath, my voice trembling slightly. I felt like a criminal. I felt dirty, snooping through a private conversation. I almost deleted them a dozen times. But then I looked at my son. I saw how tired he was. I saw how hard he worked for a woman who was laughing at him behind his back. I straightened my back, looking directly into Amanda's panic-stricken eyes. I decided I would rather live with the guilt of being a snooping old woman than let my son be turned into a joke by the person who is supposed to love him. The atmosphere in the room solidified. It was no longer a debate. Aunt Ruth turned her back on Amanda completely. Kyle looked at the floor, ashamed that he had ever doubted me. The air was thick with the realization that they had all been played. Daniel stood motionless. He was not looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at his wife. His face was unreadable, stripped of all color. "How long?" Daniel asked. His voice was barely a whisper, but in the silent room, it sounded like a gunshot. He was not just asking about the affair. He was asking about the deception. He was asking how long he had been sleeping next to a stranger who called him a naive boy to her lover. The question hung in the air, unanswered. dangling over the ruins of their marriage. Amanda did not crumble into silence as I expected. Instead, the revelation seemed to snap something vital inside her. She slammed her hands onto the table, her face twisting into a mask of pure, venomous hatred. She turned to me, her eyes manic. "You sick old woman," Amanda screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "You are obsessed with me. You stalk me. You record me. Do you see this? Daniel. She is mentally ill. She invented this entire conspiracy just to keep you tied to her apron strings because she is terrified of dying alone." She pointed a shaking finger at me, desperation fueling her next attack. "She is dangerous," Amanda yelled, looking around the room for support. "She forgets things. Just last month, she left a pot of soup on the stove and went to sleep. I had to run downstairs and put out the fire before she burned the whole house down. She is not safe to live with. I was trying to save us from a tragedy." I flinched. It was true that I had scorched a pot once because I had fallen asleep from the medication the doctor gave me for my back. But there had been no fire, only smoke. Yet, seeing the doubt creep back into the eyes of my relatives, I felt my defense weakening. Then, from the end of the table, a small, trembling voice spoke up. "It is true," Aunt Ruth said softly. I turned to my sister, relief washing over me. Finally, someone was going to defend me? "Thank you." "Ruth," I said, breathing out. Tell them it was just a mistake." Ruth did not look at me. She stared down at her hands, which were twisting a napkin into a tight knot. "No, Martha," Ruth whispered, her voice shaking. "I mean, it is true that Amanda was trying to get you help. She came to me last month. She gave me an envelope. There was $500 in it." The room went dead silent. I felt as if the floor had opened up beneath my feet. What I asked, my voice barely audible. She said it was a holiday gift." Ruth stammered, tears leaking from her eyes now. "But she asked me to talk to you. She wanted me to convince you that Maple Crest residence was a paradise. She said you would listen to your sister. I needed the money for my car repairs. Martha, I am so sorry." I stared at my sister, the woman I had shared a bedroom with as a child, the woman I had trusted implicitly. She had taken $500 to help evict me from my own home. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Amanda had done. Amanda was a stranger. Ruth was blood. "You took money," I whispered, feeling the cold seep into my bones. To get rid of me, Amanda seized the moment, straightening her posture, trying to reclaim the narrative. "See, I didn't do this alone. I asked the family for help. I was desperate. I was trying to manage a difficult situation because Daniel was too weak to make the hard choice. I looked at Ruth, who could not meet my gaze, and I realized how truly alone I had been. I stood there, surrounded by family, yet I was on an island. But the chaos was not over. My cousin Kyle, who had been shifting uncomfortably in his seat all night, suddenly stood up. His face was flushed. "Shut up." "Amanda," Kyle said loudly. Amanda whipped around. "Excuse me, I cannot sit here and listen to this anymore," Kyle said, looking at Daniel. I knew too. I saw her at the Rusty Anchor 3 weeks ago. She was with a bunch of suits. She was drunk. Kyle took a deep breath, pointing an accusatory finger at Amanda. "I heard you," Kyle said, his voice hard. "You were bragging to your friends. You told them you were playing mind games with the VP to get what you wanted. You said you leaked the promotion rumor to see who would crack. You laughed about it. You said Daniel was too soft for the corporate world. The color drained from Amanda's face. Her narrative of being the victim, the protector, the harassed employee. It all shattered instantly. She was not a victim. She was the puppet master, and she had pulled strings that attached to everyone in the room, from her boss to my own sister. Panic set in. Real, unbridled panic. Amanda realized she had lost the room entirely. She slammed her fist onto the table again, making the silverware jump. "This is illegal!" she shrieked, her voice shrill and piercing. "That video is illegal. Those recordings are illegal. If any of you try to use this against me, I will sue you. I will sue every single one of you for invasion of privacy. You cannot do this to me." The room erupted into chaos. Aunt Ruth was sobbing. Olivia was shouting at her mother to stop. Some of the cousins were whispering frantically about lawsuits and scandals, but amidst the noise, a few of them moved. They stepped away from Amanda and moved to stand behind me. It was a small shift, but it was a line drawn in the sand. The family was fractured, perhaps permanently. But for the first time that night, the eyes looking at me held apology, not accusation. The shouting in the living room had reached a fever pitch, but I remained the calm eye of the storm. I raised my hand, palm open, not in surrender, but in a command for silence that I had not used since Daniel was a toddler. "Everyone, please sit down," I said, my voice steady and surprisingly loud. "There is still one more thing, a piece of the puzzle that none of you have heard yet." I did not wait for their permission. I pointed the remote at the television and navigated to the audio folder on the USB drive. I pressed play. The screen remained black, but the speakers crackled to life. The sound was muffled at first, accompanied by the low hum of an engine, but then the voices became crystal clear. It was a recording taken from the back seat of a car, echoing slightly as if the window was cracked open. "We need to accelerate the timeline on the Falcon project." Amanda's voice filled the room, sounding cold and professional, bereft of the warmth she feigned at home. "Daniel is asking too many questions about the budget discrepancies. I need you to replace him. Replace him." Victor's deep, rumbling laugh followed. "He is the lead. It will look suspicious. Not if he is under investigation." Amanda replied, "I told you. I have already set the stage. Everyone knows his mother is a loose cannon. If any confidential data leaks, we blame her. We say Daniel was negligent in securing his home office. If the mother is seen as unstable, no one will believe her if she tries to deny it. She is the perfect scapegoat." Daniel sat frozen. His hands gripped the edge of the mahogany table so hard that his knuckles turned a terrifying shade of bone white. The recording continued. Victor spoke again, his tone dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know there is an internal audit coming. Right. If they find the missing funds from the darker accounts, someone has to go down for it. That is why we keep Daniel's name on the signature line," Amanda said, her voice dripping with calculation. "He is the sacrificial lamb. Victor, he takes the fall. We keep the money, and the Human Resources Department comes out looking like heroes for catching the mole. He is too naive to see it coming." The word naive hung in the air like toxic gas. Daniel's face had gone past pale. It was grey. He was listening to his wife and his boss plot not just to fire him, but to frame him for embezzlement and ruin his entire life to cover their tracks. Suddenly, the audio cut out with a sharp pop. Amanda had scrambled behind the television stand and ripped the power cord out of the wall socket. The TV went dead. She spun around, panting, her hair disheveled, looking like a cornered rat. "It is fake," she screamed, her eyes darting wildly around the room. "That is AI. Anyone can make deep-fake audio these days, she and that senile neighbor of hers. They cooked this up. It is all a lie. It is not a lie. Amanda." The front door, which had been left unlatched when Kyle stepped out to make a call earlier, pushed open. Mrs. Irene walked in, shaking the snow off her coat. She looked small and frail, but her eyes were steel. She held up her own phone. "I recorded that 3 days ago," Irene said, her voice clear. "I was waiting for my son in the parking lot of your office building. You two were standing right next to my car. You were so busy plotting that you did not even notice me sitting in the back seat with the window down. I gave the file to Martha because I could not let you do that to a good man." Daniel looked at Irene, then at me, and finally at Amanda. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. It was not just an affair. It was not just a bad marriage. It was a criminal conspiracy. The woman he slept next to every night had prepared a prison cell for him. Amanda realized her denial was useless. She backed up against the wall, her eyes narrowing into slits. She decided to burn the bridge completely. "You idiots," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you have done? That recording is illegal? You recorded a private conversation on private property, and you—" She pointed a trembling finger at Daniel. "If you let this get out, I will sue this entire family into the ground. I will report you for leaking corporate secrets. I will make sure you never work in this state again." She was trying to use fear to silence us, swinging the hammer of the law to crush the truth. The cousins looked at each other nervously, the threat of legal action making them hesitate. I stepped forward. I was tired. My legs ached, and my heart was heavy. But I was done being afraid. "You called me a traitor." "Amanda," I said, my voice low but cutting through her screaming. "You told this family that I was the one selling secrets, but now we all see who was actually selling my son." I looked at Daniel. He was standing up now, his chair pushed back. He looked at me, then at the empty black screen of the TV. And finally, he turned his gaze to his wife. "It is up to you, Daniel," I said softly. "I have shown you the truth. What you do with it is your choice." The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Daniel to shatter. But he did not shatter. He stood up, slowly, pushing his chair back with a deliberate scrape against the floor. He did not look at me. He did not look at his weeping aunt or his stunned cousin. His eyes were locked entirely on Amanda, the woman he had sworn to protect for the rest of his life. "You called my mother a traitor," Daniel said, his voice low and devoid of any warmth. "You stood there and destroyed her character in front of our family. You did all of that, while you and my boss were planning to turn me into a criminal." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He did not hesitate. His fingers moved across the screen, dialing a number I knew he had memorized, but never thought he would use. It was the Ardenvale Anonymous Ethics hotline. Amanda lunged at him. "No, Daniel. Stop. Do not do this." She grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his sleeve, tears streaming down her face in a chaotic mess of mascara. "We can fix this inside the house," she begged, her voice rising to a shriek. "Please, do not let this go too far. Think about our life." Daniel looked at her hand on his arm. Then, with a sudden, violent motion, he shoved her away. It was the first time in 10 years I had ever seen him refuse her touch. She stumbled back against the sideboard, gasping. "Hello," Daniel said into the phone, his voice steady. "My name is Daniel Ellison. I am a senior manager. I need to report a massive conflict of interest and an active embezzlement scheme involving Vice President Victor Hale and my wife, Amanda Brooks." Amanda let out a sound that was pure animal rage. Realizing she had lost control of him, she spun around to face me. Her eyes were wide and filled with hate. "You miserable old hag," she screamed at me. "This is your fault. You ruined everything. You just had to stick your nose into the lives of young people, didn't you? Why couldn't you just stay in the basement and rot?" I did not answer her. I did not yell back. I simply reached behind my back and untied the knot of my apron. I pulled the stained fabric over my head, folded it into a neat square, and placed it gently on the back of my chair. It was a small gesture, but to me, it was a thunderclap. I was done serving this house. I was done being the shadow. Aunt Ruth stepped toward me, her hands shaking uncontrollably. "Martha," she sobbed, reaching out as if to touch my shoulder. "Please. I am so sorry. I needed the money. I never thought she would go this far. Please forgive me." I looked at my sister. I saw her fear and her greed, and I felt nothing but a vast, empty exhaustion. I do not have the strength to carry anyone else anymore. "Ruth," I said softly. I turned my back on her. Whether I would forgive her or not was a question for another lifetime. Tonight, I was finished with being the peacemaker. "Yes," Daniel was saying into the phone, ignoring the sobbing women around him. "I have audio evidence. I have text messages. I am prepared to cooperate fully with the investigation." He hung up the phone and looked at Amanda, who was now slumped on the floor, weeping into her hands. "Pack a bag," Daniel said coldly, "and do not speak to me. From this moment on, you can communicate with me through my lawyer." It was a death sentence for their marriage, delivered with ice-cold precision. Suddenly, the room was bathed in flashing red and blue lights from the window. The doorbell rang sharply, followed by heavy knocking. One of the neighbors, hearing the screaming and the crashing furniture, had called the police. "Police, open up," a voice shouted from the porch. The room erupted into a new kind of panic. Kyle ran to the door. Aunt Ruth was hyperventilating. Amanda was wailing. In the middle of the confusion, I walked quietly to the coat rack. I put on my old wool coat and picked up the small handbag I had packed 3 days ago. I had known, deep down, that the truth would blow this house apart. I had been ready for this exodus. I opened the front door, stepping past the confused officers who were rushing in to assess the domestic disturbance. I did not look back at Daniel. I did not look back at the life I had built and lost in that house. I stepped out onto the porch. The night air in Colorado was biting cold, filling my lungs with a sharp, clean chill. Behind me, I could hear the radio of the police car, the sobbing of my daughter-in-law, and the broken voice of my son trying to explain the unexplainable. I walked down the driveway, my boots crunching on the snow. I did not know where I would sleep that night. I did not know what tomorrow would look like. But as I looked up at the winter stars, I took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I was not afraid. I had walked into the fire, and I had walked out with the only thing that mattered. I had my truth. Wow, that was quite a ride, wasn't it? Thank you so much for listening to my story. It really means the world to me that you took the time to hear about what happened in Westbridge. I would love to know where you folks are tuning in from, so please drop a comment down below and tell me which city or country you are listening from, and let me know what you would have done if you were in Martha's shoes. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, hit that like button, and smash that hype button so we can get this story out to as many people as possible. Stay safe out there, everyone.